So we are now jumping into InDesign, the new program we're going to be using for the last 2 weeks. You will find a lot of similarities, a lot of carryover from Illustrator. And there are a couple of features that are different and unique to InDesign. And I'd like to go over some of those features in this video tutorial. What I have in front of me here is the practice that I'd like you to do with me. And we're going to be going through the steps right now. So let's start with going up to File, New, and choosing Document. So you'll notice right away, instead of artboards, I have an option for number of pages. For this practice, let's put in 2. I also have an option for facing pages, as in a book, where I have one on the left and one on the right. For this practice, we don't want to do that. And you can see here, we'll go over more of these details in the Adobe video, but all of the other defaults that you have. I just want to point out that you have a column option here. And for your practice, where you're making the black and white and the grayscale grids this week, you may want to set your columns to 3. And those will just be guides that will be set up for you and get you started. But for right now, we're leaving all of these at the default. I'm going to click OK. And that gives me my blank page, and I have some margins here. I'd like you to go over to your Pages panel. I have mine open already, and you should see it docked here on the side with all your panels. And if you don't, you can go up to Window and choose Pages. From my Pages panel, I see I have page 1 and page 2, and they both have an A over them. The A, if I go up here, is for my A master. And a feature that InDesign has is that I can work from my master, my A master, and it's going to apply to every other page that has the A attribute or the A assigned to it. And obviously I can come up with other masters. So this can be very useful if you're creating a layout and you want to have, let's say, the heading in the exact same place, and you have a design and a logo, and you want to have that in the exact same place in all of your pages. So if you apply it to the master, it's then going to apply to every single one of the pages. So when we're working to start with, to set up some of our features of our page, we're going to work on the A master. So double click that, make sure that's the one that you're working on. And now the first thing I'm going to do is to set up my guides. And this should be familiar from Illustrator and Photoshop. My rulers are already visible, but if you don't see them, you would go under View, Rulers. They're visible, but they're not in inches. So to turn them into inches, I'm going to right click on my ruler and switch to inches. And I have to do this manually for both of them. Okay, great. Now that I have my rulers and they're in inches, I'm going to make a guide. I'm going to start at my horizontal guide at the top and drag it down to 3 inches. And then I'm going to take my vertical guide and I'm going to drag that over to 5 inches. What I'm going to do here in this practice is we're going to put some text on a grid and make it a dynamic grid. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do now that I have my, my guides here is I'm going to take my line tool and I'm going to start over at the right hand side at the intersecting point of my margin and my guide here. And I'm going to start clicking over towards the left, but I'm going to hold the Shift key down. So without the Shift key, I can go any way. But as soon as I hold the Shift key down, I am constraining my proportions and I'm moving over only staying on the horizontal. Now, I want to create a dynamic grid, so I'm not going to go all the way over here to my left-hand side, because that's going to make it perhaps a little boxy. So I'm going to stop around 6 inches. I could put another guide here as well, but I have my smart guides, and that tells me that I'm now at 6 inches. And I'm going to let go. And if you notice, you barely see your line because it's almost the same size as my guide. So here's a keyboard shortcut. If I do Control semicolon, I can make my guides move away. And if you're on a Mac, that's Command semicolon. And I can bring them back and I can see them again. So I want to make this, my line here larger, and I want to change the color. So it is already selected. I can tell that it's selected because it has the anchor points, but if it wasn't, I would take my selection tool, just like in Illustrator, and select it. So I'm going to go up to my control panel, and I'm going to change the weight of that stroke to 20 points, make it a lot larger. And I have my stroke value, because the line is simply a stroke, and I'm going to change that to a red. Okay, so if if I look in my pages and I look on page 1, double click that, and I look on page 2, I can see that they both have the guides and this red line, which is pretty cool. Now, one thing to note is that if I did want to change this, I would have to go back and change it from my master. I can't edit those guides or the line on the pages directly, but I could delete them from being related to the master. If I right click on it, I can choose apply a different master, which is what we're going to do, or override all masters. So we're going to do that in a second. But right now, let's create another master. So I'm going to right click on where it says a master and choose new master. And this one is going to be called B, and I'm absolutely fine with that. That was a default setting. And let's go ahead and set those guides again to 3 inches and 5 inches. And I'm going to take my line tool and starting on my right hand side, click at the intersection, hold the shift key down and move it over to make it 6 inches long. And don't worry if it's not exactly, it's just a practice. Go up to my control panel and change the points to 20. So far it's all the exact same. The difference is this time I'm going to choose cyan for my drop down. So we just simply have that as a practice, right? So now I'm going to right click on my page 2 and I'm going to say apply master to pages, and it's going to ask me which one, and I'm going to choose B and click OK. So now page 1 has master A applied to it, and page 2 has master B applied to it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to master A, and I'm going to take my text tool. And one thing that is slightly different with the text tool in InDesign is that I can't just click and start typing in. I have to make a text frame first. So I'm going to click and drag out to make a frame, and I can resize this frame. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to type in Unity on a grid, and then I'm going to select my text by clicking and dragging over it, and go up to my control panel, and I'm going to make it larger, maybe 36 points, and I can choose a different font. I'm not going to spend too long on it right now because I want to make this video relatively short. So let's see, I choose here, I'll choose Century Gothic. Not exactly what I'd want, but it'll work. And I'm going to make this slightly larger. I'm going to do it manually because I don't want to go make it 40 points. Okay. And now I'm going to take my selection tool and drag my text down. I can also use the arrows on my keyboard so it lines up with my Unity, with my red bar that's underneath it. Okay, and so now I can see that that is also on my page 1. I've applied that. One thing that's kind of neat is I'm going to go back to my master A here, and I'm going to copy my text, Unity on a grid, and I'm going to go into my page 2 and go to Edit, Paste in Place. So that's something that's kind of unique. A couple other programs have that, but Paste in Place is going to put that text exactly in the same spot that it was copied from on your original document, which is neat. So of course what I could have done is gone into my B master and added this Unity on a grid, and I just did this kind of as an example to show that you can copy and then use the Paste in Place feature in InDesign. So now if we're looking back, page 1 has Unity on a grid in red, page 2 has Unity on a grid in cyan. So I'm going to now work on my pages, not on the master. So I'm working on page 1, and I want to show you how text can be connected. Let's say if I have text that I've written in another program such as Microsoft Word, and I want to copy this, and it's 5 pages of text. Well, how do you paste it in? So you can connect it and simply move that text frame around, and all of the text is going to flow around into your following frames. So I'm going to click and drag. Actually, I'm going to undo that. Sorry. I want to make a really large text box, larger than I'm actually going to end up using on this page. And then I'm going to fill it with filler type by going up to type and choose fill with placeholder text. And that's great, it fills it. Take my selection tool and I'm going to reduce the size of this box to fill it into the size I have for my guides lined up here. That's what I want. And I actually want this to come down quite a bit. We're just doing this as a practice, so don't worry too much. What do I have it at? About 6 or 5 and 5.5 inches is down here. Something like that is fine. What I wanted to point out is I now have this little red box, and I think you saw this in Illustrator as well. This little red box here that tells me I have more text actually that I've pasted into this document than can fit into my text box here. And if I control click it, I get what's called a loaded cursor. And you can see I'm moving around here and I have my text. So I'm going to scroll down to my second page and I'm going to draw out another text box. And there goes my loaded cursor. It loads it into the next text box with the remainder of the text. And you can see that I still have even more text going on here because I have the red plus sign. If it didn't have any more text, I wouldn't have the red plus sign. Let's see if I make this box larger, for example. You can see I no longer have the red plus sign. So all of my text has fit into here. And I'm going to just make it smaller because for the sake of this practice, I want to show kind of like a more dynamic type of grid. And I'm going to move this down as well to where I was on the other one, approximately 5 and 5.5, something like that. Okay, so moving the text around is pretty simple. I can think about my page in terms of creating different columns, and I'm going to draw out one column and fill it with text, and if it doesn't all fit, then I'm going to create another text frame and place in the remainder of the text here, and then I can reshape it by using my selection tool. So now let's just talk about how to put in a simple shape, because what you have for your practice is I'm asking you to draw out some boxes and grids and think about a variety of different types of grid structures that you could come up with on a page. So I'm going to take my box tool, my rectangular tool, and to make a rectangle into a square, I'm going to hold my shift key down and click and drag it out, and I'm going to make a small square here. And I want to fill it with color, so I'm going to go up to my control panel and choose the fill option. And I'm going to take that same red that I used before, and I want to put my stroke to no stroke, and I want it to have a black outline. And now I can, with my selection tool, nudge this over or use my arrow key so that it lines up exactly with my guide. And remember, I can do the control or command semicolon to be able to move my guides away. So that's kind of the look that we are going for. I'll bring them back. And let's go over to page 2 and do the same thing. I'm going to take that rectangle tool, and I really should have guides set up here so I know exactly where to place these, or I could be doing them on my masters if this was going to be on each one of my pages. Hold the shift key down and again drag out to make a square, go up to my fill, and I'm going to choose the cyan color and put my stroke to no stroke. And then I can use my arrow keys to just nudge and put that over and line them up. So that's basically the practice that I wanted to be able to go over. The main difference between Illustrator and InDesign, I would say, is the Pages panel. So I'm going to give you some other tutorials from Adobe that will go over some of these concepts in depth, and then you can get started on your practices.